What I'm going to talk about today is just some lessons we learnt from our most recent game, Fastlane, and how that fits into our overall strategy. I think just in the interest of time, though, I'm going to focus on one particular learning that we took from the game, and that's around ad monetization and some designs that we landed on with that. The reason Fastlane is significant for us is our first sort of departure from build and battle strategy games. So we made 3 games very much in the shadow and inspired by Clash of Clans, and got very good at sort of working with a very core audience. And Fastlane's a very casual game, still resonating with those kinds of players, but obviously much broader appeal. The other reason of significance is we talk a lot about live ops and how we approach content management and event design, and this is the most extreme sort of implementation of that we've done as a studio. Basically, it's our most profitable game, and it's operated by 2 people out of a studio of 115, which allows us to invest in a lot of other projects, and then obviously ad monetization, which is the area I'll focus most on today. For those of you who don't know Space Ape, we're a 6-year-old mobile game studio based just up the road in Soho, about 115 people, and we're exclusively focused on mobile free-to-play. Those 115 people are split across 10 teams currently. 4 of them are operating the live games that have generated around 150 million revenue, about half of which was in the last 12 months. This is the timeline for when our games ship, so roughly 1 game a year, starting with Samurai Siege and Rival Kingdoms, and then Transformers, all strategy games, as I said. Fastlane launched this week a year ago, and each one's been more successful than the last, but nice incremental growth. And then around this time last year, we teamed up with Supercell, who came in and bought a majority stake in the studio. They run us very independently, similar to how they run their internal teams. So we operate as a completely independent entity, but obviously when we need help, we can draw on it. But behind the scenes, we've been working on a lot of stuff and putting as much of our studio resources as we can into riskier and innovative projects. Things we've done in the past have done a good job of paying the bills for the studio, and that's been their brief, but they haven't really, if I'm being honest, taken the sorts of chances that we need to take as a studio to make a real impact on the gaming ecosystem, and that's what we want to do. So all those little icons represent games that are either in progress or have been killed, and roughly 70% of the studio is focused on new games. 30% is operating these live games, so 30 or 35 people, 2 of whom are on Fastlane. And really our mission is to make a category-defining game. And so where does Fastlane fit into this sort of mission? Who's played Fastlane? Who knows what I'm talking about? Okay, some of you. For those who not, here's a little video that should summarize the game pretty well. Get the idea. Top-down shooter, very casual in art style, but with a theme that we think resonates very well with sort of mid-core or a more valuable segment of users that we were used to dealing with in our strategy games. The team's mission was to create this category-defining game. They had a good thesis, and that was this type of game has supported multiple sort of top-grossing games in Asia, $1 billion game in China, a couple of $500 million games. But in the West, for one reason or another, all games of in this genre have got a lot of installs, but maybe haven't enjoyed the same sort of level of commercial success. And so they had a bunch of theories about why Fastlane would achieve that mission. But what they realized about a month after launch, a few weeks after launch, was Fastlane fit with our big mission about as well as this ice cream and ferret fits with Wesley here as one of the bosses, which is, it did pretty well, but it was not achieving the level of success that we'd set ourselves as a bar. And so they very quickly decided to put the game into what we call live ops mode. Now we have not successfully put a game. We've put one game into full live ops mode. Samurai Siege, our first game, is operated by a team of 3. But Rival Kingdoms and Transformers both have a couple of devs on them, and so they're pretty lean for the amount of content and events and activity that goes on in the games. But they weren't dev free. And what the Fastlane team said was, well, look, we want to work on bigger opportunities. How can we put this game into dev-free mode as quickly as possible, while still acknowledging that this is our biggest game, right? And so they didn't want to throw it out, but they didn't want to tie up resources who could be working on the next one. So they quickly instrumented the game with content management tools. This is something that we do with all our games, but they just took it to a next level and really seriously committed to the notion that all game logic, all stats, all content was abstracted from the client and could be managed by people who are non-technical and run be subjected to A/B tests and tuning. We talk about live ops in sort of two formats. One is the set of tools that allow us to host content, to serve it up at the right time, and to abstract all of the logic from the game. And then also the idea that they can produce this content really efficiently. So, for example, these are 2 YouTubers we did a deal with. They've got about 50 million subs across Latin America. And through the tools that they developed, they developed it explicitly so they could support these kinds of deals, inserting characters, inserting IP into the game, creating custom events and that sort of thing without involving any developers. And they've planned out events through 2019, some of which require high levels of content, some of which are basically reskins of Garcia the mascot in different characters. But really, they committed to this notion that the content is abstracted from the game and that they shouldn't need any devs. But really, the big learning for us in putting the game into live ops mode is we unlocked, or not quite by accident, but it was certainly a nice surprise to validate some of the ideas that we had. It monetized really well via ads. So when the game launched, it had a decent ARPDAU from IAPs. It's got a nice little economy, but there's not a lot of breadth to it. As opposed to a strategy game, which we're used to getting $1 to $2 ARPDAU, 6 cents felt like it was a little bit low. But when we started adding ads and optimizing the ad units, we could double that. Or in some markets, triple it. So 13 cents ad ARPDAU is what we get in the US. We get 18 cents in China, the 2 biggest markets. Blended globally, it's more like 6 or 7 cents, but it's still a significant part of the game. But more importantly, it unlocked our ability to spend on user acquisition. So we're used to, in strategy, buying on an 18-month or 12 or sometimes even 24-month payback cycle, bidding $5, $10, $15 for CPIs. Because of the ad implementation here, we were able to acquire users and get their money back in 1 to 2 months. This graph here shows the impact on ARPDAU of some of the optimizations we made around the ads that kicked in around December last year. So you can see there the ad ARPDAU rose from about 5 cents through to 13 cents in the US, with not really any impact on the IAP ARPDAU. The IAP, there was a little bit of cannibalization, went from maybe 7 cents to 6 cents. But that was more than offset by the gains in ad revenue. This is the graph that shows the top line growth of the game. So the single line is the DAU. So starting at around 300,000 when we launched, we put the game into live ops mode, as I said, and over the next 6 months it slowly declined to about 200. And then once we cracked the code on the ad features and unlocked UA, we quadrupled revenue, we quadrupled DAU off the back of that. So what features what was the thinking behind the ad features? Well, the way we thought about ads in our previous games, we'd tried to put ads in Samurai Siege and Rival Kingdoms, and they contribute maybe 1-2% of the revenue. Was this thinking that there's an unlimited supply of demand, there's an unlimited supply of ad inventory. The more opportunities we can present in the game for an ad to appear, more money we're going to make. So the design rationale is very much be as aggressive as we could possibly be up to the point where we start to sacrifice the user experience. And I think that's a pretty common approach. You treat ads as a necessary evil, something you've got to do. You go as far as you can, but you don't sacrifice the game experience. And nothing epitomizes that approach, I think, than this proposition. Very clear, you can spend $1 to make the ads go away if you don't like the ads in the game. The problem with this approach, not just the 99 cents ads free and just the general idea of thinking about ads as something that risks the user experience, is it pits the interests of the developer against the interests of the advertiser. And so when I'm playing a lot of games, when an ad appears, that's usually a cue for me to take a sip of coffee or look around the tube and see if I should be giving up my seat to someone or change the channel on TV. Anything but watch the game, right? So we are, as developers and as an industry, training people that ads are a necessary evil, not intentionally, but I think that's the way a lot of ad implementations sort of condition users to react. So we said with Fastlane, how can we make ads work for both the players and the advertisers and have this as a sort of fundamental sort of pillar of the design? So that led us towards rewarded ad units. We have a few interstitials, and we certainly tested a lot of different formats. But what we found is by far the most effective way to get people to want to engage with the ad units was to make a very compelling reward. We held back content from the main economy of the game, so there's certain things you can only get by watching an ad. We put the ad unit itself into a Skinner box. They are randomly served as far as the user's concerned. Behind the scenes, there's some really smart targeting that I'll get to in a minute. But when I see an ad, I've got a very limited time to engage with it. There's a very compelling reward. And if you'd asked me, and we target spenders and non-spenders alike, and if you asked me a year ago if I believe this was a genuine review, I'd say, no, that's just an enterprising employee from an ad network. But we get this feedback every day. People want to engage with the ads with Fastlane. They want to see more of them. And I think that's a big driver behind why they've been so successful. The other thing we do with each ad unit is test against long-term retention. So this is the result of a test we did on a pretty aggressive interstitial format. Interstitials, a gameplay interrupting ad. You have to watch the ad to continue. And on the blue column is a group that saw an interstitial at the end of every race. The orange group is a group that saw one every second race. And obviously the blue group we made a lot more money from, we served a lot more impressions, but there was a 2% difference in the day saver retention, which doesn't sound like a lot in absolute terms, but it's huge when you compound that over time and look at day 30. And when you compare these tests to the rewarded video units, the difference was much higher. So whereas in the past we were designing our ad units to try and get as many impressions as possible, what we were optimizing for now when we're doing A/B tests is really long-term retention and then trying to get the best ad format within that. The other thing that wasn't really a change for us because we're used to developing free-to-play economies, but I see a lot of developers do this, and we do this as well with our dev cames. We're always fighting this. So the idea that you should make a good game, and then you figure out what the meta should be, and then you figure out the monetization hooks, and then you add the ads. And generally, that doesn't make for a very coherent and effective sort of economy or ad revenue. So we didn't really have that problem with Fastlane. We have it with other games for sure, because we're already building it with a free-to-play economy in mind. So there were plenty of pinches, there was sessioning, there were moments when ads made sense, but it did influence our theming. So there's a lot of references in the game to rampant consumerism. There's billboards on the road as you drive by. There's larger-than-life characters, and so messages like this don't seem out of place. Contrast, if we'd chosen a military theme or a space theme, it would have felt very bolted on. So that was a deliberate move on the theming part. But really, the main pillar that we had to fight against was this notion that we want to keep people in the game. Once someone clicks on an ad, they're playing in someone else's game. You can't talk to them. They're not engaging with your brand. You can't monetize them. And so there's this natural tendency to design your ad units in a way that keep people in the game. And our ad UA guy was very, very insistent. And his point was, I spend my whole day trying to optimize my ad spend and weed out the games where people are not clicking on our ads or where people are clicking on the ads but not spending any money. And people, maybe 5 years ago, no one had the tools to track this stuff. But in 2018, this is bread and butter for a lot of UA people, and a lot of the money is getting spent on performance basis. And so rather than try and fight that, design ad units that actually give UA people what they want, that actually drive installs. And so this was the biggest change in our thinking, I think. And it's very counterintuitive, the idea that you want to serve ads and actually make people leave your game, is hard to get your head around. But when you embrace that and you start thinking about, okay, people will leave our game. How do we make sure they leave and come back? It really leads you towards certain types of ad units and away from others. So if you think about it, the vast majority of ad units that you come across in your games that you play day in, day out are designed, intentionally or otherwise, to keep you engaged in the game. So for example, an ad unit at the end of a race that says, okay, you've just died, watch an ad to continue. That is telling you that, okay, just put up with this ad so you can keep playing, because that's the fun bit. Don't care about the ad. When we serve up an ad unit at the start of a race or at the start of a session, say, watch this ad to get two times XP for the next race, or 2 times XP for the next 5 minutes. It's telling people to stay in the game. Similarly, if you have a permanent offer in the corner, like engage with this any time to get double coins or 100 coins, it's telling you to engage with this whenever you like. Don't bother about it now. You can do it whenever you like. Similarly in the shop. And of course, interstitials are sort of the classic. You serve this up and you want the player to keep in the game and keep playing after the ad's shown. You don't want them to actually click. Other ad units that we put in perform much better. And actually, there were 3 ad units that made all of these other ones redundant. And we tested a lot of these, which is one of the reasons it took 6 months for the ad units to sort of start working. But one of the most effective ones is we have an energy mechanic. You've got 5 fuel cells. When you get down to your last fuel cell, an ad will pop up and say, hey, watch this ad and fuel will regenerate 50% faster. And by the way, you've got 3 minutes to interact with this ad. So it tells the player, okay, you've got this offer, go and do your last race, and then watch this ad on the way out before you go and do something else. Likewise, a multiplier at the end of your race. We know what your average session time will be based on your player behavior. If you're expected to churn after 4 minutes and you finish a race at 4 minutes and 10 seconds, you're going to see an ad that says, well done, you just made some resources in that race, do you want to double it? Or an offer that's pegged to the output of your last race. Now, when I tell this story, a lot of people say, well, yeah, but your game's got an energy system. Energy systems they're not cool anymore. People want to be continuously playing, or I've got a game that needs maximum liquidity, so I don't want people to session out. But this doesn't need an energy system to work. Think of Clash Royale. You can play Clash Royale forever. You can move up and down the trophy ranks. But if you want to get the items that will progress you in the game, they're gated behind a chest. That chest unlocks once you've won a certain number of battles, and then it's on cooldown. And doesn't matter how many you win, you need to wait for that cooldown to finish. And so there are sessioning mechanics that don't require energy. And if you think about it, you can always find ways of predicting when is the most likely point when a player is going to be finishing their session, and find the ad unit that works at that point. So to recap, the lessons that we learned from Fastlane was to really take the live ops investment seriously. I'll share some links afterwards if you want to get into more detail on that. But yeah, really commit to it from the beginning. Build the game, assuming that you want to roll devs off to chase bigger opportunities. Really focus on the player proposition for the ads. Make sure that they want to watch an ad and they are in a positive frame of mind when they see it. Always A/B test against retention rather than impressions, and think about your ad design from the beginning. But most of all, we spend a lot of time running user tests, playtest clouds, thinking about what our customers want and what's going to be fun and what's going to engage and what's going to make them spend money, and not enough time thinking about the other constituent that is paying you money, which is the advertisers. And so I'm not saying that you should make a game for the advertisers, but dedicate a percentage of your time to think about what's going to drive the person who's advertising your game to spend more and to keep spending. And ultimately that comes down to sending people from your game out the door, but then making sure they come back. If you want more information on these topics, you can just Google Space Ape Live Ops, and you can also Google Space Ape Fastlane ads. And there's a very detailed blog post that we did about a month ago that was reblogged in a couple of publications, which has a lot more data and a lot more sort of background on that. And finally, I don't know how much the pugs were responsible for the success of Fastlane, but yeah, they padded out my presentation nicely.
Hi, in the example where you said you A/B tested putting an interstitial at the end of every race or every second race, you saw an increase at 2% on your day 7 retention. So are you saying that the trade-off was that you're showing 50% less interstitials, but you'd prefer the extra 2% on the day 7? That's worth more to you? Is that what you came up with?
That's right. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And that was just an example of 2%. There were differences of 5% in some tests. But yeah, point was, there's a point where that retention compounds, right? Because the higher your DAU, the more virality, and just long-term retention is the most important thing for us. It wasn't always. It was monetization, but we found that just like a couple of points on day 7, certainly a couple of points on day 30, is just worth exponentially more. So it's not always the case. Maybe there's if you have a game that has very, very low day 30 retention anyway, going from 1 to 2% probably doesn't make much difference. And so in that case, maybe focus on just getting as many impressions as possible. It tilts in that favor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Simon. Thanks a lot for the talk and sharing the numbers. Great as always. A quick question on your take for the future of the in-app advertisement revenue versus in-app purchasing revenue. Where do you see that? I mean, at the moment, in-app purchases is the gold standard, right? Generating over 90% of all the in-game revenues. But what do you see in, let's say, 2 years? Where is in-app advertisement going to be?
I still imagine the majority of the revenue is in-app purchases. But I think the share of ad revenue will be much bigger. I think ultimately, though, the ad revenue is driven by in-app purchases because ultimately it's people who are monetizing their game eventually who are buying users from games that monetize worse, right? So I think freemium, free-to-play IAP economies are not going away, but we'll certainly see more big successful games that are ad-supported. It's hard to imagine $1 million a day ad-supported game for me. Like maybe they exist and they're under the radar, but I think there is a you need so much scale to monetize through ads that I think IAPs will still be a thing in a few years' time.
Kind of following on from that, actually, I was wondering, you mentioned how obviously you've moved developers off Fastlane onto other projects. Is that onto other projects that are focused around IP revenue then because of that goal you have? Or do you think you would like start development of a game with ads as your primary monetization mechanism? So
we're not business model led, we are category led. So the way and also too, we run a very distributed model so that the teams drive this. So generally the way that the teams approach new game development is they say, what is a category that we could own, right? It might be that category exists already and we have some reason why we could run some theory about how we could run the table on it. It might be the category doesn't exist at all and it's completely greenfield innovation. It could be the category exists in China but hasn't worked in the West, etc. So they start with the category and then figure out the theming and the meta and the monetization and everything that would achieve that end, right? So some categories are just naturally magnets for people who will never spend, right? And in those cases, the teams are very much focused on ads. And I would say for each of our games in development, all of them have some sort of ad component. So either they think it'll be sort of Fastlane split 50-50, or they think it'll be at least a significant enough component to take it seriously. I don't think any of the teams think that they've got a game that will be exclusively ad supported, but that we're not averse to that. It's going to be led by the category.
Okay, thanks for your business case. It was very interesting. A quick question regarding the formats.
Oh, hi.
Hey. My is formats. There is a new format which is payable ads driving good engagement from players. What's your insight regarding payable ads? Most of my developers don't like payable because it's maybe too much in terms of engagement from the users to drive out of the game.
So as advertisers, we like playables. We spend quite a bit of our UA budget on playables for Fastlane. I think it depends on the category again. Playables never worked for Transformers or Rival Kingdoms or Samurai Siege. Actually, they weren't around when Samurai Siege was being marketed. But no, I think it's an interesting format. I think it is a nice way of aligning the interests again of advertisers and developers, because ultimately you want to entice people to click on the games, right? And if the playable does it, then great. The problem I have with playables is a lot of them are just very low quality, and so it's a little bit of a turn-off when I see a playable because it's going to be another one of those rubbish ones. And so I think just generally raising the bar on the quality would help. But yeah, we're pro. We don't have any in Fastlane at the moment, but I think that's more a function of the type of deal we did with we went exclusive with one ad network, and it's not because we're averse to the ad unit.
Hi. I know your talk was mainly focused on mobile advertisements and so on. I don't know if you have any insight into how advertisements can be used on other platforms like console or PC, and whether or not people would actually respond negatively to that.
None whatsoever, I'm afraid. I'm a mobile-only gamer, and we're a mobile-only business. So I would think the principles are quite similar, though, because you think about television. No one resents having an ad on TV. Or for those who still watch TV. So I think similar principles apply. Like you can run an arbitrage model where you're just trying to extract as much value from the dumb money as you can, and I think that works when new platforms open up and new ad channels open up. But I think eventually things catch up, the technology catches up, and the people spending the money get smart, and so the idea of driving value for your advertisers and making that important concept, I think, holds no matter what platform you're at.
All right, thanks. Cheers.
Simon, thank you so much. So let's give a round of applause.
Thank you.